I'd say you're good to go.
All right, great. Good morning, everyone. My name is Bonnie Stewart, and I'm the CEO of the Connecticut Society of CPAs, and I'm glad to have you join us this morning. Today, we're going to have two guest speakers for our town hall that will touch on things that are happening up at the Capitol, and then I'll wrap it up with a couple of CPA-specific bills at the end. Our first speaker I've known for quite some time, and I'm thrilled that he was willing to join us this morning, and it's Scott Roberti. Scott was formerly with General Electric and is currently with Ernst & Young, EY, and is the chair of the CBIA Tax Committee. And he focuses on tax policy and compliance and the business impacts of legislation and regulatory changes. So we're thrilled to have Scott with us this morning. I've learned a lot from Scott over the years, and I think you'll enjoy his presentation this morning. So, Scott, we'd love to hear about what's happening up at the Capitol before the Finance Committee that's of concern or interest to businesses, and anything in particular you think that CPAs should be aware of.
Awesome. Thanks, Bonnie. We certainly do go a ways back, and I've learned a lot from you as well in my journey here in Connecticut. So happy to be here. Hope everyone is doing well. I am a lifelong resident of Connecticut, even though I've worked for two of the largest companies and consulting firms in the world, and I travel quite a bit. So what I thought I'd do today, I'm pinch hitting for Chris Davis over at CBIA. So I'll let you all grade on how well I do at the end of this. And you'll probably want Chris back because he's much more in tune with what's going on in Hartford. But I thought I'd do a couple things. One, just a quick national overview, and then I'm going to get into Connecticut. And I promised Bonnie I wouldn't spend more than 15 or 20 minutes to keep you all on time. So as we think about sort of the national landscape and where the states are, specifically our neighbors to the west. Think about New York, right? They're right in the middle right now of budget negotiations. Their fiscal year end is March 31st, so it's a little bit quicker than Connecticut's. And there's significant differences between what the governor and the assembly and legislature are doing, and things that may influence Connecticut at some point, things that we need to sort of keep an eye on, especially when I think about the pass-through entity tax regime and the New York City mayor's proposal, which is also embedded in the Assembly and Senate bills, which would reduce the credit down to 75% versus where it is now. So things to think about. Our neighbors to the north, Massachusetts, they're actually working on a federal conformity bill right now. They're trying to get that done, which would be quick for them by the end of March. So estimated payments and so forth can be filed. So for those that have multi-state practices, this is sort of just a quick, sneak around the region for us. Here in Connecticut, just to sort of table set, the Finance Committee is holding hearings on a number of the tax bills that are before them. Their committee work needs to be done by Wednesday, April 1st. As we know, we're in a short session this year, so session ends sine die on Wednesday, May 6th. So hopefully we'll get our work done and we get an on-time budget. Couple of things that we've been focused on, the governor's budget, which was introduced earlier this year, which sits within Senate Bill 84, has a number of provisions from a tax point of view. First, it's hard to walk away from OB3, the one big beautiful bill that was passed on July 4th. So they're first going to tackle conformity. And there's a couple provisions in there that impact those corporate filers. So under the R&D, under 174, Connecticut's plan, which is actually similar to what the Massachusetts governor put forth, would be to decouple for years prior to 2026, so not allow for that immediate expensing, which we're seeing as a bit of a trend across the states in the U.S., and then conform to immediate expensing starting in 2026. Just a couple things on depreciation, which is 168K. What's accelerated depreciation or an immediate expensing for production property, qualified production property. The governor is also calling to decouple from that, which is quite frankly in line with what Connecticut has done with regard to accelerated depreciation over the years. I will say what's a little unique in Connecticut's bill, and I'll give tip of the cap to DRS for this. There is a provision at the end of this section that allows for a waiver on interest and penalties on underpayment of both estimated tax and final payments on any retroactive provisions in here, as long as the tax is paid in full by November 15th of this year. I will tell you that is not a consistent provision that we see across the country. You usually have to present yourself before the department and plead your case. For those individuals or for those practitioners that deal with any sort of foreign source income, I will just say there's a update provision moving from GILTI to NICTI. The treatment is going to be the same. Connecticut was one of the first states to come out and treat GILTI as a dividend subject to the 95% DRD. Moving along the pass-through, so Section 5 of the governor's bill has a research and development tax credit for pass-through entities. As many of us know, pass-through entities do not share the same ability to take tax credits as C corporations do. So this would apply to entities with less than $70 million in sales. It's a 6% tax credit for R&D expenses incurred. And the shareholders would take that, or owners would take that on their personal income tax return. I'd say the unique provision with here is that the credit's capped at $25 million a year, or $1.5 million per taxpayer. There is a refundable aspect to this. Firms would have to apply to the DECD to reserve their tax credit allocation each year. So I'm assuming there's going to be an appropriations element if this were to pass in future years. There is in Section 7, the tax rebate. It's an election year. I'll just state that. So we see these types of provisions come up, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this more, but there's a tax rebate of $200 to $400 based on your adjusted gross income. And sort of instructions on with regard to the Department of Revenue Services sending this money out. There's a general fund hit for this. I'd say the area that's getting the most attention outside of taxes impacts to the volatility cap. Yet again, we're back at looking at adjustments to this. Doing this on a multi-state, multinational basis, I will say the volatility cap in Connecticut has been critical to keeping our expenditures reasonably under control over the years compared to other states, which are facing challenging times, especially as the federal government continues to pull back with regard to the amount of money they're sending to the states for programs like Medicaid and SNAP, right, which is the other side of the one big beautiful bill. The governor has yet again called for a one-time use of the volatility cap, and this continues to be a concern. I know one that is hotly debated, and Bonnie's all over this with the sort of rest of the business community in pushing back. Obviously, the concern here is if some of the adjustments that are made, especially some of those in the legislature, they will basically gut the volatility cap, and then we're sort of put in a position where we won't have revenues to meet our expenditures in probably about 3 to 5 years, which is a very short period of time. That's sorry, it's got a pop-up question. That's it with the governor's budget. There are a couple other bills that we're tracking. I'm not sure they're going to get traction, right? Connecticut is one of those states where legislators can put forth bills into the committees at a fairly regular basis. I would say one that may garner attention is HB 5185 with regard to a surcharge on cap gains and dividends for those taxpayers in the highest marginal income tax bracket. Again, I think Connecticut is in a sweet spot, right, with our 6.99 top rate compared to, let's say, Massachusetts, which, as we all know, put a 4% surcharge on taxpayers over $1 million and has seen a migration out of the state. Obviously, we know what New York is doing and has done, and the push in New York City to, again, extend the rate. I think that puts Connecticut in a really good economic position to attract people. And then House Bill 5010, which is the individual side of OB3, which is the exemption of tips and overtime that was introduced. I'm not sure that gets legs. That's a pretty significant revenue hit for this year, if it were. So that's it, Bonnie. I don't know if there's a ton more. I mean, I think I was talking to Chris yesterday. Some of the things we're starting to hear with gas prices starting to tick up. I don't know, right? We're up to 365, 375 in some cases. If you're close to the highway, $4 a gallon for gas. The governor has started to float the idea of some sort of suspension of the gas tax. Again, how would that be paid for? Again, probably with a one-time hit to the volatility cap, which it's hard to argue where things are from an affordability perspective, especially since PPI just came out this morning and inflation continues to tick up on core goods, food, services, and things of that nature. So that may get some traction, but you're closer to that than I am.
And we've seen a lot in the HBJ and the Connecticut Mirror, et cetera, talking about how legislators are thinking about pulling back on some of the givebacks where taxes were concerned to try to help municipalities with their property taxes as it relates to education budgets. So not a surprise this time of year, we start to see a lot of modifications, both from the governor himself as well as legislators to the governor's budget. So you raised some good points there in terms of different things that are being looked at and changes from both legislators and the governor to the various bills that are out there. The other interesting thing is Rhode Island has a millionaire's tax proposal this year, and they're also looking at decoupling the bonus depreciation. So really good point in terms of the region looking at these issues right now. Love to hear it when Connecticut could come out a winner with something, because that wasn't the case, as you know, for years and years when you and I were working on things at the Capitol. We were always trying to catch up. So, but all the sessions are all the states around us are in session right now, every one of our neighboring states. And I think we are the last to finish up this year. So we should know before too long where the other states are, and if we do have any edge at all in the end. Do you think that the decoupling measure, that's something that we as practitioners always find, I think annoying is a fair word, is a lot of work that goes into getting it straightened out here. We have that with several issues, whether it be municipal bond amortization or decoupling, where you have to go back and fix things that the software does not always address. I would imagine, given that so many states are looking at that, that's one thing we don't expect to be changed. Is that fair to say?
I would say that's fair. I think Connecticut's proposal, as it's been drafted in the governor's bill, is reasonable, right? In the sense that it addresses it's hard for states to do retroactive tax policy, right? Let's put it this: they like to do it when they raise money. It's hard for them to do it when they have to give back money, right? Because they have to balance their budgets, right? Unlike the federal government, which can print money. But I'd be surprised if those were to change, especially in a corporate tax side, Bonnie, as they've been drafted. And look, I can acknowledge, right, the compliance, I'll just say it, nightmare, right? You look at Connecticut, which is a rolling conformity state. And honestly, I've had discussions with Department of Revenue Services, and we both agree that Connecticut's really become selective conformity at the end of the day, especially since TCJA. And most of the states are in the same bucket. Just be thankful that you're not doing tax returns in DC with the mess that's going on down there in the Home Rule Act, and Congress is actually leaning in on DC. They have an absolute mess on their hands from a compliance perspective, because all their forms were printed for 2025, as you would expect. So
that's great. We have time for a couple of questions. April, I can't see questions on or people from my iPad here. Can you tell me whether or not there's anybody there that has a question, either raising their hand or in chat?
Yes, I will let you know. If anyone, if you'd like to either just use the emoji, the raise your hand emoji, or just jump in at this point. I don't, I
Is
don't
there
see it.
anyone ever looked at increasing the base rate for the threshold for sales tax on luxury vehicles? It's been 50,000 for like ever and ever. And it, really 50,000 isn't a luxury car. So has that come up lately?
There was a proposal in the committee regarding the luxury tax, but I don't believe it was to raise the threshold. They also were trying to address a couple of other things regarding the sales tax. Everything they did a few years ago, where you have to pay tax when you're taking out foods, and the way that the grocery markets have to deal with it. But I don't believe any of those have actually talked about raising any of the thresholds for when those additional taxes apply. Have you seen something that I haven't, Scott, on that front?
I have not. I will concur the $50,000, considering when it was enacted, is a bit low, which is scary, right? If you think about the price of an average car. But no, I have not seen anything.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Well, Scott, thank you very much for joining us this morning. I really appreciate your taking the time, and it's nice seeing you again.
Also, it's nice seeing you too. Enjoy the rest of your conference. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye. April, do we have Dallas with us?
Bonnie, I do not see him here yet.
Okay, then I'm going to jump in. We finished a little earlier than expected, so I'll cover the CTCPA issues, the CPA issues right now. I'm actually going to follow up on what Scott was talking about, because we do have one measure in the Finance Committee that's of interest to the state tax group, and that is a bond amortization measure. The bill that came out did not have our specific component in it, but it did try to simplify bond amortization a bit. We did testify, CTCPA did, Alan Covette, our state tax chair, did. And in our testimony, we did request that not only do we support the measure as was, but we did ask for additional information to be added to it, or additional provision that would actually treat non-Connecticut municipal bonds the same way it treats Connecticut municipal bonds. The committee really is hesitant to do anything right now that they view as a loss of monies, because of everything that's happening at the federal level that's really impacting what's happening at the state level. So they're trying to find dollars to make up what people have lost, or entities have lost, municipalities, et cetera, from the federal government. So I'm sure if you're reading the paper, you've seen a lot about SNAP benefits and how the state's trying to come up with literally millions of dollars to fill the gap between what people had and what they currently have under the existing administration in Washington, D.C. There's a lot of bills like that up at the Capitol right now. So I think that anything that costs money, and the way that legislators view it, it's not a fix, it costs money if there's a fiscal note attached. So it's pretty much an uphill battle for us in the Finance Committee right now. We're still going to try to trudge up that hill and be able to plant our flag at the top. For those of you who know me well, I'm a bit competitive, and never say die, we're going to make it. So I do have that CTCPA flag that my kids made one day, making fun of me about what I'm trying to do at the Capitol sometimes, and how I just won't give up. So we will continue to work on that issue, as well as others in the Finance Committee. But do know that the Finance Committee is looking at things very differently this year. It started last year, but I would say that it's moved into full drive as additional cuts are made, and people that they feel are in need are being hit by changes at the federal level. So that bill is there. The other, I'm going to say, our biggest concern was actually a bill in the General Law Committee, and that was House Bill 5222. And it concerned the Department of Consumer Protection, and it was put in by the Department of Consumer Protection. The first two sections of that bill would have given DCP the same authority when it comes to CPA enforcement as the Board of Accountancy has. That was a real concern to us, because there's nobody at the DCP that has the knowledge needed to actually be able to make decisions, or legitimate decisions, when it comes to a lot of the cases that come before them. So, for example, we had a member call last year and say, hey, we're being required to change our marketing materials, our website, because we're advertising for attestation services. And we're not enrolled in peer review because we don't have any attestation clients yet. So DCP did not understand that you can't enroll, you're not eligible for peer review until you've actually got something that can be peer reviewed. It went on for months and months. The firm had to hire attorneys, and then finally we brought it to the Board of Accountancy, who had the knowledge and resolved it very quickly. But we have quite a few cases like that. So making sure that the State Board of Accountancy is notified of these claims early, and that we have the ability to have those that have expertise in a given area make those decisions is extremely important. It's very important. We also found out that if the bill had passed as it had been proposed, that Connecticut was in risk of losing mobility because it would have taken out that expert component that's really needed to ensure that CPAs that are doing something wrong also are our enforcement procedures take place there. And it happens quickly. You know, if someone is doing something wrong, the rest of the states want to know for mobility purposes that we're acting on something and doing so quickly so that they don't have someone coming into their state because we have a claim going on for, 1, 2, 3 years, et cetera. So I would like to tell you that we did meet with the Department of Consumer Protection, the State Board of Accountancy Chair, Tim Egan, and I did. And the commissioner, the deputy commissioner, were absolutely great when we raised our concerns with them. They agreed to poll sections 1 and 2, and they agreed to work with us over the next several months to determine how best to ensure that the State Board of Accountancy actually has the opportunity to review all of the different complaints that are coming in or actions that DCP may be bringing on their own, so that we can ensure that they are addressed properly and timely. So it'll take a while, but we were very happy with the meeting that took place with the deputy commissioner and feel that we're on the right path. And so that's good news. The bill came out of committee the other day with sections 1 and 2 removed. So that is no longer a threat at the state capitol for us. 5222, as far as we're concerned, is fine now because it does not touch CPAs. It does not touch our Board of Accountancy, and it's already out of committee. Does anybody have any questions or comments on that measure? Selecting my polling answer. Okay, I'm back. Great. The other measure that was before the General Law Committee concerning CPAs, as well as other professions, was a measure regarding fees, licensure fees. Those remain a big issue. But I will tell you that this year, while the measure is there, I do not expect it to make it to the finish line with CPAs in it. If it was just CPAs, it would cost about $16 million. Last year, before it was known what was happening at the federal level in terms of the total financial impact, we had a better chance, and we did make it across the Senate line and died on the calendar again at the end of the session because of timing in the House. I would tell you that that measure is going to be off the table probably as long as this administration is in place in Washington, because the state legislature feels that they do need to fill gaps created by the lack of funding where the federal government is concerned. So we did testify in support of it. I hope it still comes out of committee because legislators do support it. But I do think because of the fiscal note that will be attached, it will have much more difficulty than any of the other measures we've talked about. So those are the issues. I'm so sorry. Those are the issues on the CPA specific front. Again, any questions or concerns? Do I need to continue, April, or is Dallas with? Okay, so we did tell Dallas to please join us at 9:30. We've got a few minutes before then. So I'm just going to update you actually on the State Board of Accountancy and some things that are happening there, because I think you'll find them very helpful. The State Board has had a change in leadership. John Schuyler continues to serve on the State Board, but he did ask someone else if they'd be willing to take the chair. And Tim Egan, a former partner at KPMG, who since retired, has done so. He has been great to work with as the chair, as was John, but particularly where this legislation is concerned at the state capitol and ensuring mobility. So on that front, the pathways front, do know that since we have talked about pathways, that New Jersey and New York have both adopted the pathways measure, and Massachusetts and Rhode Island currently have it before their legislatures. So by the end of this legislative session, what now is 20 states that have passed it is expected to be, or I should say by each state's legislative session, all of our neighboring states will have been expected to pass it. And there's actually a chance that 46 of the 50 states will have adopted pathways. 2 are in a holding pattern because their legislature either meets every other year, which is the case with North Dakota, one of the states, or in Wyoming, they're only allowed to do budget bills this year. So this is not a matter that can be taken up. Both of those 6 states expect to pass it in 2027 when they're in. So the way things are going right now, we do expect all 49 states, because Hawaii doesn't currently have mobility and they're not moving on it this time either. So 49 of the states, the 48, because nobody knows what's going to happen in Louisiana right now, but the other 48 states are expected to have adopted mobility by 2027. But again, the overwhelming majority by the end of 2026. So I just want to thank everyone for your efforts on that measure last year and the year before as we worked on things. I have never seen a piece of legislation in all my years lobbying where it's had an impact so quickly. So I was saying to April and some other people in the office the other day that just looking at LinkedIn and some of the things our members are posting, I saw 3 different posts where we had somebody that was freshly had graduated from undergraduate school, and each of them has chosen one of those 3 pathways. So we already know it's working. One person said, got my bachelor's degree. I'm glad to announce that I'll be working for such and such company. I plan on pursuing my CPA through experience, because that's the best way I learn. And I'm thinking, okay, good for you. Somebody else who announced that they were going to be getting their master's in accounting, and, happy for them. That was another pathway. And the last one I saw was somebody else who said, got my bachelor's. I'm working on certificates in technology now, data analytics, and some other tech issues to get my additional 30 credits and give me a heavier background, greater knowledge when it comes to the IT world. And I'm like, good for you. You're doing the bachelor's plus 30. So just wanted everyone to know that your work is already paying off. And it's just absolutely great to see a piece of legislation that only became effective, 6 months ago, October 1st, already have such an impact on our next generation of CPAs. So thank you very, very much for your efforts. I'm glad to see that Louisiana is seeing some movement. Their reason for not moving forward wasn't that they don't support the pathways legislation. It's because there was a bit of a dereg movement in their state, and they didn't want to have the situation that was in Florida, where people were looking to unlicensed CPAs, veterinarians, engineers, etc., move forward. So again, it's not that Louisiana does not support the measure. It's a question of other things that are happening at their state. They need to be strategic, so we support their efforts in the way they're moving now. So good one for that. I see one question in chat. Lisa is seeking some movement now.
I just shared that, Bonnie.
Oh.
Caitlin sent that along.
Oh, got it. So just want to make sure that everyone's aware of the fact that ours is in place. The State Board of Accountancy did issue guidance in terms of giving people the information they needed regarding classes, et cetera. And those are slowly working their way through the regulatory process. I say slowly because Connecticut's regulatory process is extremely slow. It takes around 3 years, unfortunately, for new regulations to be adopted, or even modifications to existing regulations, unless there's a set currently in the process that you can piggyback onto. So we expect those to take a while, but it really doesn't matter because we've already got guidance, and that's been issued to the State Board of the State Board of Accountancy has issued that to the DCP, and DCP, as far as we know up to this point, is in agreement with everything the board has said. So some good stuff happening on that front as well.
Bonnie, Dallas will be at another couple minutes.
Okay. So just FYI, Dallas is our state, our contractors, our lobbying this that we hire at the Capitol each year. We hire Roy and Leroy, and Dallas is one of those individuals. I really want him to be able to touch on the data issues because he's been following those very closely. In addition to us being one of his clients, Google is as well. So he's all over these issues, and I think it's really important for you to hear about some of them because it does concern data, electronic data, and those are things that we all need to be aware of. I'm just going to touch on the legislative session this year. I think you heard Scott say, and I've said on several occasions, that it's a short session. Connecticut every other year has what we call a long session. Those are the odd years where we go from January through June. And then we have short sessions, which are in the even years and go from February to May. In Connecticut, those short sessions are supposed to be for committee bills and finance bills only. So things impacting the budget or something that a committee as a whole believes needs to be brought forward. So we have fewer bills introduced because individual legislators can't introduce a bill if it's not doesn't have an impact on our budget or isn't intended to address a budget issue. So in the short session, things can be somewhat chaotic because things do move very quickly. So right now we're actually finishing up the committee work over the next couple of weeks. It actually spans a 3-week period. And that's why it's so important when we're aware of an issue to move on it quickly. So I'll raise one more that's before the GAE committee. GAE is Government Administrations and Elections, and Dallas brought to our attention a bill the other day that says that anybody that contracts with the state, in addition to any state employee, that has access to federal tax information, FTI, federal tax information, must have a criminal background check at least once every 5 years. When we initially reviewed the bill, we had significant concerns about how broad that was going to be. But when we looked at when they were talking about it being people that contracted with the state, not all practitioners, and then only those that contract with the state that have access to that federal tax information, we became aware it was much smaller. Still wanted to know why it was doing it. So we had contacted the AICPA, who told us that there is a safeguard program at the federal level that looks at safeguarding federal tax information. And so they're imposing and have set guidelines for states to require them to take special measures or to ensure the safety of that tax information. How they require it, we're still trying to find out. We've got some more digging to do. We will be submitting testimony that's broad today, indicating that CPAs and those that work for CPA firms have a lot of rules that they currently fall under to ensure privacy of data, and that if this is something that's required to be in compliance with federal law, we would support it. But if they're going beyond what's required, that we would ask that they not move forward on it, but that we're going to look into the matter further and get back to them. The reason for this is if you have to do federal background checks on everyone in the office, that's extremely expensive. We don't believe that's what they're asking for, but we want to make sure before we make a final decision. And because the hearing is today, we did not have enough time to dig really deep into the issue, but we will continue to do so and get that placeholder with testimony in that committee today. So do know that bill is out there, that we don't believe at this time, based on our conversations with the AICPA, that it is a significant concern. I do have a call into our rep at the IRS to make sure that I understand the requirements completely before we say no worries. So that's why we're putting that placeholder in, so legislators can't say, well, why didn't you testify in the General Law Committee? GAE. Too many committees at the Capitol to deal with this time of year. But just know that, again, we're on top of it. If you should hear about that measure right now, we don't believe it's a big concern, but we'll circle back to you if it is. I think that in terms of the other overall issues that are popping up at the Capitol, we're actually rather fortunate this year that we have we have a limited number of bills that individuals can introduce, because the ones that the committees have introduced, the AI bills, the tech bills, are all very large bills and require significant work and coalitions, et cetera. So we're glad to see fewer bills, because those that are out there are requiring a bit more time right now. I'd also like to give a shout out to the State Tax Committee. When the bill came up on bond amortization the other day, April did reach out to the committee and request that testimony be submitted. It's very simple. We have a system in place where we can come up with a few templates for testimony, or a letter, that takes a position on something. In this case, it was a letter in support of. So it only takes a few minutes for someone to go in and, put their name in, their firm, or whatever information they want to add about themselves, and get that off to legislators. And in the end, it was the number of letters that we had that had CPA at the end of somebody's name for the testimony that actually resulted in me getting a phone call afterwards saying, I understand you've got several members that are interested in this, and this is something your community cares about. Can we talk about cost? And that's where we're at now. That's why I have concerns that this measure may not move as far this year. But that's because not I testified. It's because I had the support of our members by them submitting testimony. So again, it only takes a few minutes, but the impact it has is significant. And exactly, we did something similar with a call to action on House Bill 5222, the one that would have changed the enforcement authority. That was absolutely essential in that committee. And again, want to say thank you very much. I always get very discouraged when we have someone that unsubscribes from those calls to action, because without your assistance, we would not be successful at the Capitol. With your joining in with us, it makes us actually a very powerful organization at the Capitol. So thank you very much for your time and effort.
We're still waiting.
We're still waiting.
Yeah.
Well, then I am going to, hold on, let me peek here. We're at 6:41. Sorry, why is it 9:41? Sorry. I apologize, everyone. I'm literally sitting in my car on a side street in Hartford. So I've got the sun coming in and hitting my iPad. I would like to also remind people that we are going to hold a seminar after the legislative session this year. We did it for the first time last year, or the first time in a long time last year, where we gave a recap. We'll definitely be doing that this year with all the bills that are out there, particularly those concerning the budget. So the tax measures, that will definitely be happening. And something will happen with data. And we do expect that something will happen on the AI front as well. So with all those things moving along, we will have an opportunity to give you an update. And so I know last year I received a lot of questions. You're going to give an update. We'll do a quick one at a town hall, but one that gives you greater in-depth knowledge regarding the tax proposals and the AI proposals. That will take place as well. I don't know when we're planning it for. I have to touch base with Lisa, but we can send that out to everybody in an email following this meeting. So do know that you will have that state legislative recap session like we had this past year to provide you with all the details you need. I know there's not enough time in the town halls to give you that, but we do appreciate that. All right. Hold on. I have another message here. This one came in through email. That's interesting. Yes. So somebody it popped up on my iPad. Somebody asked whether at that meeting we would explore in depth the tax proposals. Yes. At that session, we would go into detail about all of the measures. So when you left, you would know what you needed to do to actually implement those various new laws yourselves. Great question. It won't be like the town hall. The town hall has to touch on things slightly because we only have the 1 hour, but we will be able to go into greater depth in those other meetings. So just let me grab a sheet, because I'm starting to wonder whether, if Dallas has been pulled by a legislator on a key issue, he will not be able to join us. But I do have information on the other bills too, if needed. So I did want to let people know the reason why I asked Dallas to come is because there are several provisions in the big data bill at the Capitol that concern electronic data, how you store it, what you do with it, what you have to do if there's a breach, etc. One of the things that is that they're looking at are for people that they're deeming to be a data broker, and I don't believe that requires selling of information. What you have to do, and there's significant requirements, and there's no size to the company in terms of when these requirements kick in. So that's something that I have asked Dallas to touch on with you, so you can get some additional information. And that's in Senate Bill 117, again, Senate Bill 117, an act concerning data breaches of security involving electronic personal information. It's got mandatory forensic reporting in it. And that's also a question, because people throw out terms all the time up at the legislature, like forensic audits, when they don't exist, or they're using, terms that we use, but not appropriately. So,
excuse me, Bonnie, I'm sorry. Dallas is here.
Okay, great. So Dallas, I just started to tell them that one of the bills I asked you to touch on was that Senate Bill 117, and we're thrilled to have you. I'm so sorry for pulling you away from everything. You're up at the Capitol today, but we really appreciate your time.
Yeah, no, thanks a lot, Bonnie. Yeah, and the data breach bill, Senate Bill 117, is one of the top sort of technology bills this year. And I heard you talking about the forensic audits. I think you're exactly right that when people throw that term around a lot of time, I think that there's a lack of awareness of what forensic audit actually means, or really the lack of a definition thereof. I think that there's a lot of concern in the business community on that particular bill right now, especially because these audits would have to be given to the Attorney General's office, that it would actually serve as a way for them to basically conduct phishing expeditions when these types of data breaches happen. And I know there's also a concern too that I think depending on the type of audit that you're doing, there's occasions where it might be a law firm actually doing that audit, where that would be a privileged document that was provided to the company and allows them to better manage the data breach that occurred. And obviously a privileged audit can't be shared with outside parties, or you would break privilege. And so I think that as it moves through the process, I think there's a concerted effort right now to just kill the bill. But I think at a minimum, there's got to be some definition put around what types of audits these would be, maybe to raise the thresholds for the type of data breaches that would trigger it, and then to also create exemptions so that there's some sort of safe harbor or exemption rather for legally privileged audits.
Who introduced that bill, Dallas?
It was a committee bill, and it's really the Attorney General's office who's pushing it. So, the Attorney General by right cannot introduce bills, but he does have a few bills that are basically his. And so it's really the Attorney General's office that's the primary mover of this year.
Does that have additional causes for action or higher penalties? Are there CUTPA measures in there or anything like that?
Bonnie, off the top of my head, I can't remember if there was CUTPA in this specific bill. I do know that PRA has become a big issue this year, where on almost every technology bill, we're seeing some sort of a private right of action included. And I think that, it's a combination of, I think, both the Attorney General and the trial lawyers trying to expand their tools that they have available, but then a little bit of sort of regulatory laziness, where I think rather than create an actual regulatory structure to govern something, the thought process is we'll just let the trial lawyers do it.
Could you explain to people why the business community is always concerned with private right of actions and exactly what that is?
Yeah, so private right of action is where under CUTPA, you can basically bring what's called a qui tam claim, where private individuals can sue for violations of whatever statute the private right of action is in. And the problem with that is that it's not remedial in nature. There's things like treble damages or even punitive damages as part of that. And so it really becomes a windfall and sort of a new area for the trial lawyers to be able to expand what they can do. The concern, again, is that it moves away from regulation where you have private parties basically using these private rights of action to enforce what oftentimes is, even innocent violations of whatever statute the private right of action is attached to. And so, there's a preference. I think a lot of times there's concern with regulation, but there's a real concern with private rights of action where it stops being remedial but becomes punitive for companies that don't comply with whatever statute the PRA is attached to.
And you have to defend yourself even when you haven't done something wrong because someone's brought the action.
Right.
So that's another thing.
Yeah, and it flips the American rule on its head, where usually there's attorney's fees, cost of litigation involved that you have to compensate the plaintiff for, and then also treble damages or punitive damages for any violation of that. And there's obviously not a corresponding obligation where businesses can pursue attorney's fees against plaintiffs for frivolous claims and that type of thing. So it really does put a lot of financial pressure on businesses when you get these PRAs included. And there's not a lot of guardrails on the plaintiffs when they bring these types of actions.
Dallas, the measure has something too about data brokers. Can you touch on that at all?
Yeah, so there's been a lot of concern about regulating. Sorry, Bonnie, I think I have to submit my
Yes,
attendance.
You do. I'm so sorry.
Sorry, let me just see if I can get this off my screen.
We
Sorry.
can see you if you want to ignore it.
Okay. Sorry, I'm having a tough time. Yeah, so data brokers, I think the issue is that a lot of businesses don't even realize when their data might be being used by a data broker or might be being sold to a data broker. I think there's understandable concerns about how data is being used. This has been a pet issue of the Senate Majority Leader, Bob Duff, putting some regulation in place for data brokers. It was in last year's data breach bill as well. I think for the business community, I think that inevitably there's going to be some regulation of data brokers, but I think making sure that the businesses themselves are not liable for anything that the data brokers are doing with the data that they are selling is a priority for the business community.
And that has no limitations, is my understanding, regarding the size of the company. Is that accurate? That is
right. Yeah, there's no limitation. Like for the audits, there's I think it's 100,000 individuals is the threshold. There's no threshold for the data broker piece of it.
Okay. All right. And the AI bill, do we expect there to be significant legislation, limitations, et cetera, anything where AI is concerned this year out of the Capitol?
So we actually do. And the issue that we've had over the last few years is that there's been this tension between the General Assembly, which is gravitated more towards regulating the use of AI, and the governor's office, who I think is nervous about the impact that regulation of AI would have on economic development, but also wants to use AI to catalyze the economy and to use and to have the state start making some significant investments in AI and workforce development and training and that type of stuff. The bills that we've seen this year, or at least in their initial form, are much more palatable than previous versions that we've seen. And I do expect that this year, the governor's office and Senator James Maroney, who's the chairman of the General Law Committee, who's been the primary proponent of AI regulations in the past, it does seem like they're closer to agreement this year. The last few years, the governor has threatened to veto, and that's given the House enough of a reason not to call the various AI bills that have been proposed. Mm-hmm. This year, I think that Senator Maroney started from a much more reasonable place on both of the AI bills. The governor also has his own AI bill, SB 86. And so I do expect, I think this year, while it's not a guarantee, it's probably more likely than not that some sort of comprehensive AI bill does get adopted. One issue that we've had too is that the last few years, one of the reasons that the governor's vetoed it or threatened to veto it is that economic development concern, in Connecticut being such a small market, that we don't want to disincentivize new technology companies from coming here or be punitive to businesses that might be using AI. And one thing that they've used to throw a wet blanket on the issue is the idea that this should really be regulated at the federal level. I think it's now become very clear, though, even though we do have an executive order from the president, that there's unlikely to be comprehensive AI regulations put in place by Congress in the near future. And so that's put a little bit more impetus to getting something done on it this year. But it does seem that there's more that there's more agreement between the parties. I will say that SB 86, which is the governor's bill, is much more of an innovation first approach to it, where it does make significant investments in workforce development. It establishes a regulatory sandbox that would allow businesses to test AI products under reduced regulatory requirements. It would also create a chief data officer for the state to inventory high value state data and make it AI ready for economic opportunity. And then there is still some regulation, in particular on chatbots and imposing some safety protocols for AI that's designed to mimic human interaction. And I think that on that piece, even though usually regulation can be a little bit of a scary thing, I think the regulations that have been proposed are fairly reasonable. It's stuff that generally companies that are employing chatbots shouldn't be doing. It's things like the AI chatbots can't mimic humans in a way that develop actual relationships with people, and can't encourage people to do things like self-harm and that type of stuff. So there's a little bit of regulation in the governor's bill. And then you've got SB4 or SB5, which is the primary legislative bill on AI, which does which does have some workforce aspects to it. It would create a Connecticut AI Academy for workforce and upskilling, and also allow for or provide funding for AI learning laboratories and public-private research. But then there are some regulatory burdens there included in that bill as well. I think the most concerning, particularly probably for the CPAs there on the call, is some regulations around automated employment decisions. So a lot of companies now use AI, particularly companies like if you're using Indeed or something like that, to sort applications and do that initial review. And the problem is that the bill would require some level of human review in those job applications, which would potentially I think you would have to keep a file basically where you would have to inform an applicant of what the AI decision was on their application, that type of stuff. So that's probably the most concerning piece of it. One thing that the administration has continually raised is that I think a lot of the AI regulation is a solution in search of a problem, in the sense that there's already existing labor laws, employment laws, discrimination laws that can be applied to the way that AI might be misused. And so there's a sense that you don't need AI-specific regulations. One thing that the Commissioner of Economic Development commonly says in public presentations is that he is yet to be shown a use case where AI did something that was bad, where there was not an existing discrimination statute or something like that that would have been a tool that you could have used to deal with that situation. So I think that SB5 is the most concerning. And then SB4, which deals with consumer privacy, and that's where more of the data broker stuff is. Bonnie, that requires data broker registration. So companies that it creates a pretty broad definition of data broker, and would require them to register with the state. It also includes regulations of algorithmic pricing and disclosures where AI might influence pricing decision. And also, and this is more significant for retail businesses, limitations on the use of facial recognition and the extent to which companies can use that for like security purposes and that type of thing.
Great. Well, Dallas, thank you very much for this overview. I know for the people that are listening today that this is a lot of information. So we will draft something up for you that will be on this information that we'll have in our advocacy update as well as our other publications. We'll keep you informed of what's happening, how it's moving, and what actually passes at the end. Thank you very much, Dallas. And thank you to those of you who attended the town hall today. Hope everyone has a great day.
Thanks, Bonnie.
Bye.